Welcome to the Maury County Spotlight, where local sports, community stories, and hometown pride take center stage. From big plays to big personalities, this show is a platform for those who gain success through sports here in Maury County. I'm your host, Landon Sechrist, a proud native of Columbia and a former dual sport athlete myself, ready to guide the conversation with the past, present, and future of Maury County sports. What's up, everyone? It's the Maury County Spotlight with Landon Sechrist. I'm him, and today we're ready to kick off July on the Maury County Spotlight with a very special guest, Mr. Chris Robertson and C-Rob Tennis. We're going to learn all about it today. Mr. Robertson, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You are definitely a special guest, as all of the people are on the Maury County Spotlight, and you're our first tennis guest. So I'm super excited to talk about that because I have a special heart for tennis. I've got the tennis ball behind me in my backdrop. Although I never played, I do love to watch it, and I will love to talk about it today. So I'm super excited, Mr. Robertson. So I always start with growing up with our guest. What was your first memories of sports, and where do you really remember your first memories as far as interest in sports?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I grew up in the Midwest in Ohio, and that was during the times in the 70s in which tennis was really a happening sport, with the likes of Jimmy Connors, Chris Everett, John McEnroe, and even my earliest memories was with my parents at the local park. And you got to remember, in the 70s, there were only 3 TV stations, so there wasn't a lot of media. So you were out there playing the main ball sports, baseball, hoops, but primarily tennis. In the town of Troy, Ohio, north of Dayton, tennis was where it was at. You had every likes of families, and anybody you can imagine was picking up a racket then. In fact, it was so popular that you had to wait on a court, and there were a number of courts in that town. And I can remember my mom and dad and other friends' mom and dads hitting the ball, and I remember trying to emulate them. And from there, I absolutely fell in love with the sport. And so in the 70s, that's what you did. You basically played hoops or tennis and the like, and that's what I gravitated to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know when you speak of popular eras, specifically talking about tennis, it's the 70s, it's the 80s. Those are when a lot of players and a lot of young kids really start looking up to those athletes. So you mentioned a couple there, but were there really any athletes that you were looking at like, hey, I want to be that person when I grow up? I want to be like that person. Who was that for you?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I loved the charisma of these players, and I fell in love with this one particular player, and he was from Long Island, New York, Vitas Gerulaitis. And he had long, flowing blonde hair, and I remember taking a picture of him and saying it to my barber and go, I want to look like this cat. And and so, admittedly, he gave me a loose curl perm, and I had this huge mane of blonde hair, which I wanted to emulate him. And I may have scored a few extra points in the tennis world on that. So I wore that, and just as a direct result of just trying to emulate this guy. But there were a number of folks. I mean, Jimmy Connors and Chris Everett, they were the bomb, and I just loved it. Growing up in the 70s, though, when you hit the ball, there was something very special about that impact, about that movement, and it was just a lovely sport. I absolutely enjoyed every minute of it, and so I would say Vitas, Jimmy, Chrissy, John McEnroe, and the likes. Indeed.
Yeah, that's really cool. And The first thing that I noticed about you, obviously, is the wonderful hair. You have magnificent
Oh,
hair, and you
well,
got
thank
that
you.
that swag. So now I know the origin. Now I know the origin, so it makes a lot more sense. So when you say tennis, and you specifically just love that sport growing up, what is the separating factor as far as the nature of the sport for you? Because basketball, you look at it now, it's the sport where the players get paid the most, the least amount of contact, those types of things. Football, you don't really want to play it, you get paid big bucks, but you risk injury. What separates tennis for you there, at least when you were a young kid?
Well, it's interesting. I absolutely played a lot of hoops. In fact, I was a two sport athlete in high school and college. And I noticed that right off the bat that tennis and high school basketball also had the same movements, the same lateral movements, the same small steps it took to guard, and also just the same coordination factors. So those two became very convergent with me. And so I played basketball and tennis primarily. And so through high school and college, I was a two sport athlete, but then eventually really honed my skills into tennis. Tennis is unique because it too is really not necessarily a team sport, it's an individual sport. And that's part of the niche that I find my students is that they don't necessarily really gravitate to team sports. They like individuality, where it's just you, the ball, and your opponent. And so I think that too led to some of what I really enjoyed was, hey, it's just me. I can't rely on four other guys. So again, in the 70s growing up and through the 80s, um, tennis was very popular in the United States. It's not necessarily true to this day. I will add to this that in the 70s, I was so inspired by Bjorn Borg and John McEnroe that my father built me a tennis wall, built of double
Wow.
plywood, set in concrete. And when I look back on that, I felt so sorry for my neighbors because of that echo and that solid whapping sound of that ball. Um, I can't imagine what they went through because I hit against that wall so much. It was compulsive, um, but I loved it. Tennis is the one sport that you don't necessarily need multiple people to play. You could absolutely be a grand champion if you have a wall. And so I hit against that wall impulsively. It was amazing, and I loved it to this day. Um, with that said, I also, in my later years, in my 20s and 30s, when I was traveling in my other profession, I would find the local wall. And if I couldn't find a wall, I would use the back side of a Kroger or
Kroger.
a shopping plaza. And at one point, somewhere in Michigan, I had the police roll up on me and say, "What are you doing?" I go, "I'm working on my top spin." So yes, I mean the wall has never lost. It gives you instant feedback. It's undefeated, but you can absolutely work on every aspect of your game with the wall. I would encourage all my students to do so.
100%. And the tennis wall is very neat. It's a very neat concept. And when my dad, he grew up kind of playing on the side as his primary sport was basketball, but he said him and his sister would play, and he said, "Man, you got to find a nice wall. You got to find a wall."
There
So
you
I
go.
I, I aid that to kind of like a find a nice hoop in basketball, find a nice field, nice turf for soccer or football, or find a nice baseball diamond. That's very important. Now, before we move on here, let's talk about as far as the culture of playing with other kids. Obviously, most of the time you need another person to play tennis with if you're going to play a real game. How did you find that community growing up as far as playing with other players, getting those reps, and really starting to learn the game yourself?
Well, again, I harken back to the 70s where everybody was playing. it doesn't matter who you play. It doesn't have to be the person of the same age. I would play adults, people that were older than me, because really it came down to just the ball. Doesn't matter what level. You know, the interesting thing about tennis is that you think you've got it made. You think you've figured it out and you're really good until you go against another person that is far better than you. And then you realize quickly there are different levels. And then again, it's like basketball. The more that you can play better players, the better you get. And so I was always looking for better players, older players, and it's a fascinating sport with regards to competition.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you know that you think of individual sports, you think of the golfs, you think of the tennises of the world, and already early on, I'm starting to see the impact that that sport for you had early on, and really foundation as far as learning and understanding. Because tennis can teach you a lot in life as well. Talk about those early life lessons that tennis taught you, whether it's working together with a wall and a ball and a racket. I mean, those types of things.
Great question again. You know, when I played tennis, I played a lot of tournaments early on, and I quickly learned that you got to lose a lot before you learn how to win and compete. And I would get so discouraged. And isn't that a wonderful life lesson in itself? Is that you're going to get beat up along the way, but you have to persevere. You have to keep your eye on the prize. And that's exactly what I did. I had the most unique opportunity to take my first tennis lesson at about an age of 11 or 12 from Rick Macy, who's arguably the most popular, famous tennis coach in all of the world. Because Rick Macy grew up in Greenville, Ohio, right down the road from where I was raised. And of course, he was the renowned coach for Venus and Serena and Andy Roddick, Maria Sharapova, and others. And he became a head pro at Bob Scholl's Indoor Racket Club in Troy, Ohio. And what's really kind of funny about that is that I was totally into it, but I would love to tell you that he taught me something very profound, and he did not. The only thing I remember about Rick Macy's lesson was how to use a ball hopper. I never used a ball hopper to pick up balls before. So I was putting balls in the ball hopper and he goes, "Hey dude, just push down on there." So I mean,
Hmm.
but you know what's interesting about that lesson is that in the 70s he was teaching a far different game than what he is teaching now, because the evolution of the sport. The evolution of sport has now totally changed with regards to the biomechanics of the swing, because the game has become, like all athletes in all sports, faster, stronger, and the ball is coming at you much differently than it did in the 70s. One other thing I'll mention is that, as a note that was really funny as far as my early remembrances, was you got to remember this was during the time of white balls and wood rackets.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
evolution is now graphite composites and, of course, the color orange color ball, which incidentally is my favorite color. But yeah, Rick Macy of all things, and
Hmm.
I would encourage everybody to go see King Richard, the movie, and you've probably seen it, but Rick Macy is very much has a large role, of course, in Venus and Serena's lives. But he was very much depicted, and I remember his effervescent personality was the same as when he taught me as when was depicted in that movie. So I'm honored to have been taught by him. That might be my claim of fame.
Yeah, that is a very unique story being taught by him, and that's a perfect segue because the next thing I was going to ask was what inspired you to now become a tennis instructor, and we're going to talk all about C Rob tennis as we progress into the show. But what initially caused you to, hey, I want to teach young ladies and young men the game that I love? Was it your
Thank you for
playing
asking
days?
that.
What was that route for you?
So I having played high school tennis and then evolved into playing at a small junior college in West Virginia on a $400 scholarship. I was a dual athlete, played college hoops and tennis. And I was asked to teach a high school girl in West Virginia, and that was my first lesson. And the coach said, Chris, we want you to teach because we like your strokes. It's very smooth, and we think you would really be able to help a local high school team. So I taught a young girl when I was in college, and they paid me $40. Well, I had died and gone to heaven. That would have bought me, multiple cheeseburgers. So I was very happy to do so. And from there, other high school kids came and saw me. And that always stuck with me as going, man, that is really fun. But what separates me is that I was really into understanding the biomechanics and understanding how do you hit this tennis ball better than most. And I was able to communicate that. Not only that, I had fun with the kids. And so that actually prevails to this day, is where my ability to really interact with kids, families, but also to really know their level, know what they need at this moment, all the way to even in an elite level. So yeah, that was back in college when I had my first tennis lessons with kids. Just so happens they asked me to do so, and that is really transcended to what I'm doing today.
Yeah, and that's a phenomenal story because it's always those who give back to the community and they have the passion. You can see it in themselves that it's not a transactional thing. It's about, instilling those lessons and also teaching the game as you do in an excellent way, as we can see with Chris Robertson tennis. But your beginning as far as having your why in the right way is really a big reason because you weren't in it for just to get the benefit for you. You were actually in it because you love the game. Talk about just having the love for the game.
Well, I'm a very excitable, passionate guy. When I get into something, I really get into it wholeheartedly. If you come to my house, most of the time I have it on the tennis channel. I'm a complete, unabashedly tennis nerd, as Tiger is with golf. I'm a
Yeah.
tennis nerd. I live it, breathe it, eat it. I absolutely absorb the game on every level. With that said, I then transferred to a larger program in NAIA school in Texas, and then continued teaching all the while playing. And that became also something that I really enjoyed doing. I will say that when I transferred to Lubbock Christian University in NAIA school, that I really was humbled because we played a lot of D1 schools, Trinity, TCU, Horned Frogs, Texas Tech,
Yep.
UT Arlington,
Yep.
SMU, and the likes. And we would get hammered. I would get hammered. Totally humbled. Again, once, understanding different levels. But I learned very quickly and through the years that it doesn't necessarily mean that your ability, just because I wasn't highly recruited, nor did I ever make it to the pro ranks, didn't prohibit me from really understanding how does an elite player do what they do. There are 8.3 million people in this earth, but only a few hundred can do what they do. Now, why is that? And that's what I was interested in from even early on in my 20s, is what separates these players? Why do they do what they do? And so I was able to, again, be able to try to be the best player I could be, all the while still trying to learn more. And to this day, I'm a student of the game.
Hmm.
I'm always learning.
And that's really important, that the fact that your love still leads you to learn and also teach. And that's really the point of spotlighting someone like you because you're doing it for the right reasons. And I mean, all about C Rob Tennis Academy, tennis instruction. What led you to Murray County and start the enterprise that you have that's giving back to the young ladies, young men for so long. I mean, you've been doing it for a while, Mr. Robertson. What led you here, and what led you to start C Rob Tennis in the way it is now?
Thank you. So I have a father that's a crazy entrepreneur, and he owned some manufacturing plants in the auto industry. So don't think that I was always a tennis pro or a tennis instructor from the very beginning. I did have another life, and that was being a plant manager, understanding manufacturing. And so one of our largest customers asked us to move to Tennessee and to supply them. And I did that in 1987. So I've been a resident of Columbia since 87. But with that said, I taught on and off, entered tournaments, played a lot every week, of course, but still had managed that plant in what would be Lewisburg, Tennessee. But in the 20s, I was also, prior to moving here, the assistant pro for a couple of clubs in Dallas, Texas, and such. So I continued before I moved here. When I
Right.
moved here, I continued playing, and that's what brought me to really what I say is God's country. I love Middle Tennessee, and I had traveled extensively, but I love it here in Middle Tennessee, the foothills of the Smokies and the Bible Belt. I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely love it. So when I moved here, I was asked by some parents, "Hey, we understand you play a lot of tennis and that you had played college, and could you help?" And I absolutely, yes. So by word of mouth, I quickly build up more lessons here since 87. And then really it catapulted in the early 2000s where I had so many students that I really had trouble balancing my second job with my first job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since then, recently I've retired and I absolutely love it because I'm able to do tennis 7 days a week. I say 8 days a week almost
Yeah.
because I teach every day of the week for families, every possibility of students, young and old, and they're able to do that every day. The only time that I take off is when it's raining or snowing or I'm on vacation, which is not very often. So yeah, it's since '87 and really through the '90s and the 2000s, it seems as though that I've been able to teach a ton of tennis. You know, I jokingly say, and it's true, that I have taught so many folks, and I'm so proud to have the honor to do so, that these kids will come to me, second grade, third grade, they will come to me, and then they are old enough to drive to my lessons. And then able to see those students get married, and then I'm waiting on their children to come to me. It hadn't happened yet, but it will.
Yeah, it's amazing that you've been in the game for that long and in this community since 1987. Immediately when you explained the fact that you moved here with plants, I thought of the influx of people that moved to the Spring Hill community, which is what I'm familiar with, that came with the Saturns, and that's a whole new influx of people, and that's more opportunities for you to train people as well, because this area, and you know it probably better than I do because you've been around longer, but it's grown tremendously in my lifetime, and I'm only 23 years old. So I can only imagine that the growth that you have seen. And do you really think, obviously it kind of goes without saying, do you think that contributes to the opportunity and exposure for more kids to learn about the game of tennis?
Absolutely. And I've had the good fortune then to parlay my experience of teaching tennis with the United States Tennis Association. The USTA has asked me to champion clinics in which it's called Rally Cats. And this is very important. Rally Cats I've been doing now for the last 5 or 6 years in Spring Hill. And the metamorphosis or the change, as you had mentioned, has been astronomical as far as the amount of people that have moved here. Anybody would be able to understand that. However, there's so many families that want to have their kids enter tennis that it's amazing. We have a Rally Cats program, and go to USTA Rally Cats And there are 3 sessions in Spring Hill. And this is the exciting thing about C-Rob Tennis and USTA is that we are bringing this to Columbia in the fall at Woodland
Wow.
Park for the first time.
Wow.
And so it is going to be tremendous, the opportunities to have families and kids go out there on Saturdays for 5 weeks and hit that ball. We incorporate music. I bring Spider-Man to the action, the whole schmo. It's absolutely tremendous. So yeah, it's an amazing opportunity. I will say this also. As a result of hanging around this community and doing what I do, that I was able to also be the head instructor of Graymere Country Club. And I was Zion's. Then I parlayed this into Zion's Christian Academy for 6 years, starting their tennis program. And what's really cool about that program is that when I first started the tennis program, I had a handful of kids. The second year, we had more kids go out for tennis at Zion High School than the football team.
Oh,
We were
wow.
the most, yes, it's true. And the reason being is because I think I made it fun. And, tennis is a learned skill. I didn't run my athletes just to run. They're going to run anyway. Tennis is a learned skill. And the more fun that we had, the more word of mouth got out. And so I had the privilege of being the head coach there for 6 years. I had a couple of students, the O'Brien brothers, and they were 3 brothers that were tremendous players, and we had always went to state in Murfreesboro. So
Right.
we had built up a reputation of, oh, these guys are good. Those are some very fun times. In addition, the city of Columbia voted me on the city council, I should say, as being the go-to instructor for the Parks and Recreation. So if anybody were to inquire, I'd like tennis lessons, Columbia City Parks defer to me.
Right. You're the guy.
Now, and as you know, I have completed my first year at Columbia Central High School, in which it's a 5A school.
Yeah.
And
Big school.
but what's interesting about that is I had 0 boys go out. So I
Wow.
am trying to change the culture. And with this platform and my platform of C-Rob Tennis on Facebook, I'm trying to promote C-Rob Tennis. Come, let's hit some balls, but also let's build something special. And I was able to do that at Zion, and I wholeheartedly believe that will be the case at Columbia Central.
Yeah, and that's tremendous that you're a starter at Zion and you get their program up and running. Now you're at Central, like you said, one of the bigger schools in the county when you talk about population size, and you're looking to start it up there for something that's foundational for the future. And that's really important. Now, Mr. Robertson, expand on kind of the services that you provide, in the landscape of people that are familiar with training and instruction. They want to know what they're getting if they send their child to you or their son or daughter to you. What do you exactly do? What are some things that you offer as far as tennis lessons to the community?
Great. Yeah, fun primarily. Tennis is not uh, it can be a very serious endeavor, okay? But it's not baseball, basketball, football. This is a social sport in which we emphasize growth through getting better as an athlete at this particular skill, but having fun. So if a child comes to me, I'm instantly able to understand their level, but I keep it very light. I play music in the background. In fact, I'll ask them, "Hey, what are you listening to lately?" And I'll play that as value added. But I love it. This is my ministry. I do have a mission statement within C-Rob Tennis, and that is my mission is to provide a really unique service of coaching and mentoring. Anywhere from a gifted athlete to those that have challenges every day. Okay. And I want to improve the quality of life of folks in mentally, socially, physically, and spiritually. This is not just hitting the ball. This is basically what I would consider my gift as far as being able to mentor folks. This is what I consider my ministry. So you'll get that good positive vibe and encouragement. I just love it. I love everybody that I encounter. I am an extrovert. And so that vibe comes through readily with my encounters with everybody on the tennis court.
Yeah, and I can obviously see you're an uber positive person, and I'm sure the listeners can sense that this guy is super positive. This is the type of vibe that I want to be around. You mentioned some places where you have trained in the past. Where are the places you primarily do training for tennis and give instruction around in the communities to give some people some landmarks to look at of, hey, I know
Indeed.
C Rob will be there.
Well, the Rally Cats actually occurs at Fisher Park in Spring Hill. So I go up there once a week. However, I do teach locally at Woodland Park in Columbia State. But I was very blessed for the last few years to have the unique opportunities to teach in a neighborhood, a very nice neighborhood called Habersham here in Columbia. And it is very centrally located in Columbia, and it's owned by a Dr. Papa, P-A-P-A.
Mm-hmm.
And I taught his girls for a few years, and he said, "Hey, just come into my house." And I said, "Really?" And I love that because it allows it a more exclusive environment in which it's not a public environment where balls are getting mixed. But also, this is the most wonderful thing about Sea Rob Tennis in Columbia. It's surrounded by a canopy of trees in which it is completely shaded.
Yeah.
You know what the downer about a lot of outdoor sports, including golf, is that when it's 90, it can be uncomfortable.
Yeah, it
That's
can be
not
steamy.
true. That's not true at Sea Rob Tennis, where my facility is with Dr. Papa's facility, and that is a lovely court in a neighborhood shrouded by shade, and it's a great time. So, locally here at local parks, but at a local private court here at Habersham, and of course the Rally Cats program that occurs at Spring Hill at Fisher Park.
When we come back, you'll hear more of the stories that make Murray County sports special. You're listening to the Murray County Spotlight. I believe everybody has a story that's worth telling. If you're making an impact through sports in Murray County, whether it's on the field, on the court, in the classroom, or behind the scenes, I'd love to hear from you. My mission is simple. I want to celebrate the people who make local sports special and give them a platform to share their journeys. If you'd like to be featured on an upcoming episode, reach out today. Your story could be the next one in the spotlight. Yeah, so it's a variety of different locations, and that's good because it gives people from all over the county and even the greater area an opportunity to engage with you. Now, I have to ask the question because I'm not familiar myself, but as far as the different surfaces for tennis, your favorite surface, experience with playing with different surfaces, and kind of educate the listeners if they're not so much familiar with, hey, tennis can be played on more than just a regular court.
Great question. You know, in Europe, the primary surface is clay. Clay, what is clay? Well, it is crushed brick. And the ball absolutely sits up. So, with that, I mean that in the United States, we play on pavement, and the ball hits like a basketball. It bounces, and you can predict the bounce, and it's fairly fast. And that's what we have in America. In Europe, it's clay. What's odd is that I have to mention there is a unique club in College Grove, Tennessee, which is 50 minutes from here, which they imported red clay. So that is my favorite surface by far. When the ball hits, it's kind of a dusty clay surface in which the ball just kind of sits up and you can get and run to every ball. It is hilarious fun. But in America, it's primarily good old pavement that's been, covered with a surface that's somewhat porous, and that's what they expect at C-Rob Tennis. But I will say, I have not played, admittedly, I've not played grass. I have been to Wimbledon,
Yeah.
okay, and I've seen grass, felt the grass. It doesn't bounce. It's not that much fun, from what I understand.
Right.
So you've got pavement, what would be good old concrete, that's surface, clay, grass. And I have yet to play grass, although I have been to Wimbledon.
Yep. So when you talk about accessibility for a tennis player or a young person who is interested in tennis, what do they need to start with the game? What do you suggest? Are there any brands or anything that you prefer over others as someone who, hey, I'm interested in tennis, I need to start from square one? What do they need to do?
Well, again, tennis is one of those sports where you really don't need a caveat of players or opponents. A wall is great. That would be wonderful. However, tennis is a relatively inexpensive sport. Golf clubs itself, a set of clubs will set you back a few $100 at minimum. With tennis, under $100 will get you into the game. That being, and not to get too technical, but like a head racket, light, powerful. I have so many rackets, but you just simply need a racket and 3 balls. And come to a person like me. Of course, now I have grocery carts full of balls in which, repetition is the mother of learning. Proper instruction and repetition is how it begins. And then after that, competition and learning how to win. You simply need 3 balls and a racket and you're good to go. Another thing I'll mention too, a fun aspect about a lot of my girl players and guy players is that if you're into it, you can accessorize. You can get some cute tennis outfits,
Yeah.
and you can. In fact, I take my tennis rackets in some cases and spray paint them my favorite color
Mm-hmm.
in order just to accessorize and make the sport even more fun. Believe it or not, it's true.
Yeah. And that's really important, the personalization that you can see with basketball shoes or football cleats or arm sleeves, that is translatable into tennis too. And that's the biggest thing that people can learn from that. Now, I want to go back just a second. You mentioned that you were the coach at Columbia Central. As far as tennis programs in Murray County, is that a program where if it's not offered at a certain school, they can play at Central, or what is the dynamic of tennis being offered at schools?
They can. If you're homeschooled, provided that you live within the school district, you can come and play for me at Columbia Central. We just have to be careful and go through the proper channels and through the athletic directors to make sure that your eligibility is correct. But yeah, I mean, I see that on the rise, that you don't necessarily have to attend Columbia Central in order to be a part of the team. There's a lot of ability to still access competition, whether it be through Columbia Central High School or not. You don't necessarily have to attend and be a part of a high school tennis team in order to really play a lot of tennis within the community. And that is through the USTA, United States Tennis Association. There are so many tournaments and so many places of access or tournaments within the region. Now, you may have to travel a little bit,
Right,
that
right.
being Nashville, Chattanooga, and such, but it's well worth it. I will also say this: the tennis is very social. You will really encounter a lot of players that really become your friends and that you'll see throughout your lifetime. And so what I do a lot of cases, I will overlap tennis students and go, "Hey, Sally, hit with Jimmy." And those families become friends. Tennis is very, so from that aspect, It's a very social sport, and I encourage that social aspect to really just embrace it, but also, learn other people and have fun with other people.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Definitely. And the community aspect is very important for a game that a lot of people at surface value will see as it's an individual sport. Guys and girls are out there alone. No, you can actually make a lot of friends. I know I had a couple friends that were on the Belmont tennis team when I was in college, and they were the coolest people ever in their community of playing against the other players that come in Vanderbilt and Lipscomb that would play at the facilities. It's a nice community. Speak to that community. We talked about it a little bit earlier as far as you growing up, but how cool is it to see kind of like-minded people playing the same sport as you and you guys are just out there vibing? How cool is that?
It really is. In fact, if you go to other tennis tournaments, and I encourage everybody, go load up the car, take the family to Cincinnati or to Atlanta, and go hang out and watch the pros. But also, the people that hang out there are so wonderful. You're all on the same vibe. And so the tennis people there's a sense of community. There's a sense of really togetherness and happiness because we're all on the same page. If you're a tennis player, you're generally a pretty cool, wonderful, social person. It's true. I don't know if that's necessarily true for other sports where you're really banging heads, football being an example. But tennis, it's really more loose, more community oriented. But again, I'm glad I got to mention that. Please, I encourage all of my players, all of those families, load up the car, go to Cincinnati, watch the early rounds, look at these world class professionals. As I mentioned, or maybe I didn't, but there's 8.3 billion people on this earth, but only a few hundred can do what they do. So it's really jaw dropping to see these elite athletes doing. How did they do what they do? That leads me to really, again, I've always been interested in how do these athletes do what they do,
Same.
and what separates them? Well, one would say, and this is a point of interest and a topic of great discussion and debate, and that is that, well, if I practice long enough, I can
Mm-hmm.
become those. I disagree.
Right.
I think there's a God in heaven. That's my
Yeah.
belief, all right? And it's a God-given ability that only a few hundred people can do out of billions of people on this earth. And it's technically, and not to get too tennis nerdy, it's the convergence and the timing of that impact through your limbs and what we call um, basically the convergence of the impact. And so that impact of that ball on a consistent level and how they hit the ball so hard is absolutely amazing to see. You and I can both hit really good jump shots from deep. We can hit really good, great golf shots. But to do it over and over again, repeatedly, consistently, that's the difference. So, as far as getting back to your original question, it's a different vibe. Tennis is a wonderful sport in which people can really just enjoy themselves, enjoy each other, make new friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as I said, we talked about it a little bit earlier as well. It's cool to have the community and a sport that's marketed as an individual sport. And as someone who doesn't play like myself, I didn't grow up playing tennis, but I admire the sport. I look at it from a distance that, hey, these guys and girls are multi-talented and they're pretty cool. And that's a perfect segue into my next question of we've talked about the slams and different surfaces. Talk about the different Grand Slam events that are offered in professional tennis and which ones are your favorite? Have you been to any of them? Let's talk about the Wimbledon's, French Open, Australian, and the US Open.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to attend Wimbledon, and again, those are very fast surfaces, but it's mind blowing. Just again, what you're seeing as far as their ability. I've been to so many pro events that I would encourage folks to go to, that being what I consider the fifth major, and that's the Cincinnati Open. In fact, the Cincinnati Open is technically called the Western and Southern Open, but it's the oldest pro tennis tournament in the United States. That actually developed before the U.S. Open.
Right.
But as far as the slams, again, if you're dealing with the French, now you're dealing with a real something that you go to war on, and that
Yeah.
is that good old red clay in which you can't put the ball away. And for them to go out there and go for up to 5-6 hours at that high intensity level is beyond my imagination. So you got the red clay at the French, which is astounding. I've attended Wimbledon. I have yet to attend the U.S. Open in New York, only from the purely the logistics of it.
Definitely.
You can really get the value added by going to Indian Wells in California, which I've attended as well, but also Cincinnati, which is what I consider the fifth major. U.S. Open is wonderful. The Miami Open's wonderful. But you've got your grass at Wimbledon. You got your French Open. You got your U.S. Open. Roger Federer is my all-time favorite. I mentioned Vitas and Jimmy and John McEnroe, but just to see what they do is just wonderful.
Yeah, those guys, you talk about Roger, who's largely considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest player of all time. If nobody watches tennis, they know who Roger Federer is, definitely, and he's, the premier when you think of Wimbledon, at least in my eyes. And when you talk about the different slams and the majors in tennis, it's interesting that most of them are outside of the United States, and a lot of people would see that as a turnoff of, hey, tennis is an international sport. I don't have a chance of doing anything. But you talked about the American opportunities here. Talk about, and it kind of goes in with your mission with C Rob Tennis, growing the American side of the game. I mean, we talk about the men and the women that are currently playing and representing the United States. You're training potential future players for that. Talk about the future of American tennis.
That's another interesting question in itself, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. American tennis has been on the decline now for decades, and it's sad because what used to be an amazing mainstay sport in the 70s has steadily declined. When I was in college, they were all European players, and it was interesting because they were recruited and they came and played here. In fact, the University of Arkansas D1 program that's been a stellar program in the SEC has recently been dropped. And there was so much discourse over that they reinstated it. The point being is that it is on the decline. And it's sad. And there's a number of factors as to why that is. And that's why the USTA has stepped up and has developed the Rallycats program and other programs to really accelerate and try to build up what would be youth tennis. And I'm a part of that evolution. We're really trying, we're on the rebound. We're trying to really grow back to its heyday. But right now it is on the decline. There are really no other than Ben Shelton, a few other, Taylor Fritz, a few other guys and gals on the American side. It's the Europeans that are dominating. Everything cycles. Everything is a pendulum within its sport. It happens to be that we are on the uptick. I think we've bottomed out, but I really do believe we're on the incline. It's because that the United States Tennis Association has recruited and has gotten folks like me that are very passionate, that have influence within the community to grow this thing again. And my goodness, come to one of my rally cats and you'll see the amount of energy, the amount of families and the sheer number of people. And I really do believe that we'll have a resurgence within the United States in tennis.
Right. And that's very encouraging to hear. I mean, you talked about some of the negatives and the decline, but the optimism that the future is to hold an opportunity for more players to grow the game. And I want to ask, are there any players that are currently on the tour that if somebody's out there listening and doesn't know anything about tennis and wants to learn, who is or who are some players to watch that, hey, they're very technically sound, they play the right way? Who are some players like that?
Yeah, I absolutely love watching Taylor Fritz, and he has a very fundamental game. You've got uh, Smith, up and comer. She is recently just now entered, and she's in the top 100. She is a wonderful, beautiful player to watch. You've got a number of other players. Even Venus and Serena, believe it or not, are still playing. And she is absolutely the darling of tennis. Venus is now she's 41. She's still playing. And these are the players that I think we need to look up to as far as, the really elite
Hmm.
status players. Ben Sheldon, I can't say enough about him. When I first saw him, I thought, who is this monster of a player? And I saw him up close in Cincinnati, and come to find out now he's in the what would be top 15 in the world. He
Yeah.
is such a positive influence on kids. I would encourage you to watch him as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good spread of players. Hopefully they can pick who they like and see and ultimately learn and then maybe be inspired to join someone like you with C Rob Tennis. Now, Mr. Robertson, I ask every guest that comes on the Murray County Spotlight this show. We've talked about your sport. It's tennis, and we've talked about your memories and the growth that the game has given you and the growth that you've seen in yourself along with the game. At what point in your life did you know the sport of tennis could help you become successful?
I think it really solidified in the early 2000s when I had so many people and parents coming to me going, "Can you help?" I hearken back to not only my mission statement, but I am a mentor of Mr. Positive himself, and that would be from a guy from Yazoo, Mississippi, Zig Ziglar.
Hmm.
You can get everything you want out of life if you just help enough other people get what they want. And that really absolutely was the catalyst to what I'm trying to do, is just trying to help others. And so in the early 2000s, I was able to cultivate enough students that it's parlayed into something I would have never imagined, with that being the amount of participation, the amount of people that would love to have my help and to learn this game. So from there, that only energizes me and allows me to really want to help other people. And I just can't get enough of it. So yeah, I'd say since the 2000s is really, and it's even grown beyond my expectations, and I anticipate it being even greater in the future.
Yeah, and it's tremendous to see, as I've said at length during this episode, someone like you who cares so much is literally a beacon of positivity in a unique sport like tennis that's not one of the big three per se in America, that you're pushing it strong. And it's extremely interesting to me as someone who's the host here and has an interest in tennis. I'm sure the listeners are like, hey, I haven't been considering tennis before, but hey, C Rob, Mr. Robertson, he's got me convinced. What is your message if you had to say one thing to someone who's listening that's considering after listening to this show? I think I want to pick up a tennis racket and a ball. What is your message to that person?
Give it a try. You'll never know how fun it is unless you just give me a call. Look me up on my Facebook page, C Rob Tennis. I will hook you up with a very unique time. When people come and they go, "We'll be there," and I let them know unabashedly, "Hey, you're in for a fun time," because I individualize it and I customize it to their ability. But it's such a wonderful fun time and experience. I guarantee a good time. And just come and whack the ball around, and we'll have a fun time. Bottom line.
Yes, sir. Mr. Robertson, I appreciate you so much. It's been a pleasure to learn about the game of tennis. You taught me a lot as someone who loves the sport, didn't play. I mean, you have inspired me maybe to go pick up a racket this summer and get some reps in myself. So I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate you showcasing your enterprise here locally that is blossoming and that will continue to blossom. So, Mr. Chris, I appreciate you so much.
Come see me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been the Murray County Spotlight with Chris Robertson, folks. Hit him up. See Rob Tennis. You know where to find him on social media. And pick up that racket, pick up a tennis ball,
Let's go.
and definitely give him a shout out, folks. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Murray County Spotlight. I'm your host, Landon Sechrist, signing off until next time.